Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I got about 4 hours sleep last night, Cameron. The buzz, everything from that race, I just couldn't get to sleep, really. I thought I'd be absolutely shattered. I tried to be, but I was, but I just couldn't sleep. Anyway, here I am, bleary-eyed. I'm very pleased to be with you this morning. What a great morning. What a great Monday morning feeling of waking up knowing that, Lewis has won that race the way he did. And as a second thing, the whole Kimi performance was just brilliant as well, wasn't it? What a race.
Should we double click in the first instance, Peter, on the Sir Lewis Hamilton performance? Because there was a time, Peter, this time last year, where I wasn't sure whether we'd ever see another Sir Lewis Hamilton top step of the podium. I doubted. I saw him struggling with the ground effect cars, and no longer could he be the last of the late breakers. And was there a time last year, this time, Peter, when you thought that Lewis Hamilton couldn't do what he did this Grand Prix weekend just gone?
Um, no, I always said, I always said that if Ferrari have a car capable of winning Grand Prix, Lewis will definitely win Grand Prix again. And I think you asked me once in that case, or something like, we got round to the subject of could Lewis ever be world champion? And that's right. And I said, well, if he's going to be world champion in a Ferrari, it's because the Ferrari is a championship winning car. And if that's the case, my gut feeling is that the championship would go to Charles, but Lewis would fight him hard and win races. So, that's where I've always been. I actually don't think that he's been one of the last of the late breakers ever in his career. I've never seen Lewis as a late breaker, just for the record. Maybe I'm the only one on the planet Earth who thinks that. And maybe I've seen telemetry, which actually justifies what I've just said. But I'm not saying it because I've seen that telemetry. I'm saying it because visually, Lewis has never been a mega late breaker for me. And if you take his period up to Abu Dhabi 21, he was always breaking on the turn-in phase anyway into most corners. So how do you measure a late breaker then against the straight line breakers? You can't. A and B, ever since Abu Dhabi, yes, he's straightened out his braking patterns a lot, and he's kind of where he's been since Abu Dhabi 21. But he's got a little bit more confidence with the front. He's sort of halfway there, and it's a beautiful balance. It's Carlos Sainz, but it's a little bit earlier than Carlos Sainz, and it's a lovely rhythm that he's got there. I'm talking Carlos when he was at Ferrari. And so, yeah, I think he's driving absolutely perfectly for the car as it is at the moment. And you can't take that away from him at all. And just fabulous day, fabulous win.
He wasn't too bad, was he, Peter? He felt like he was. I've heard it said about Lewis and the other goats that when they get a sniff of 25 points, all of a sudden their endeavour dials up from 10 to 12. And it felt like there was something about Lewis similar this race weekend, even how the conversation that he had with his engineers, put back the reference tyres on. I don't want to go out on softs. Even the communication he had with the brand new race engineer, Carlos Santi. What times do I need to do here? Because in brackets unsaid, it feels like there's 25 points on the line. Lewis, when he's in this mood, Peter, how many drivers in history do you think we can put in the same sentence as him?
Well, I will answer the question, but I don't think it's mood. I think it's more just sheer skill and professionalism in the truest sense of the word. That when, for whatever reason, whether you're quicker than everybody else, the car's quicker than everybody else has made a mistake, whatever it is, you find yourself in a position where potentially if things go right, you're going to get a serious result. Then I'm answering your question now. I think the great drivers then are very good at getting rid of all the rubbish and only thinking and being aware of what is important at that stage of the race. And yeah, as you say, it was quite funny, wasn't it, when he was saying they were so keen to tell him from the pit wall how old his tires were or not compared with the Merc tires. And Lewis just basically said, look, I just want to know how many laps to go. That's all I need to know. Don't tell me anymore. But that's not, that is Michael Schumacher, that's Nigel Mansell, that's Alan Prost, that's Niki Lauda. I mean, that's not, it's Max Verstappen. It's not in any way different from anybody who's a seriously good racing driver. Everybody, I mean, even at lower levels, I think most drivers think that way. It was just great to hear Lewis say that. And well, it was great to see that Lewis was in that position, I think, and it was just great that he's still doing all those sort of Rye House karting things, and that is what Lewis is all about, and fabulous. So he's just so good at diluting everything down to the lowest important denominator. Lowest is the wrong word, to the most important denominator.
Yeah. Fair. And to the performance specifically, Peter, I heard you say that he's got confidence now in the front end,
A little
potentially
bit of
by.
confidence in the front. I don't think enough to drive as he did in 21, but I think he's got a lot more confidence than he had last year. That's for sure.
So as a proportion of the whole, if you're talking causation, is it the fact that Lewis has got himself a brand new girlfriend that he's happy with? Is it the 8 upgrades that Ferrari have brought? Is it the fact that it's Barcelona, a track around which he's always had a lot of success? Like what are we? Is it probably a little bit of each of the aforementioned? What is it? Why is it the ground effect rules that are now long in the rear view? What is it? What do you attribute this resurgent Lewis Hamilton to?
Well, obviously, the Ferrari is not a bad racing car right now. And what you didn't mention was the compression ratio thing. And maybe that's a factor now already. Maybe this is the first time we've seen a bit more equality between the Ferrari and the Mercedes in terms of its raw power from the ice. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Bearing in mind the rulings that we had on who's allowed an upgrade and who isn't. I mean, you got to say, based on Barcelona, not a lot wrong with the Ferrari engine. Now, maybe they're caught up on the electric side as well. We don't know, but certainly, if you're thinking it from a compression ratio point of view, maybe Mercedes have been watered down a little bit. So that's the first point. Secondly, I think the way to drive these cars well is to simplify the management. Obviously, the deployment and the harvesting, that's a critical thing. And by now, I think virtually all the drivers have got on top of that in terms of what they need to do within the cockpit framework, on the steering wheel, how to respond, when to do this, recharge, and everything else. They can do all that stuff, most of them. Well, all of them, I suspect. But in terms of driving the car at its maximum, given the limitations of the 2026 regulations and how you regenerate power, I think it is hurting still, apart from Monaco, where the cars were all energy rich. I think it is still hurting the drivers that used to have a little bit of an edge in the way they could use the brakes and come out of the brake pedal pressure as they're turning in on the brakes. And that really is Lewis, was Lewis, and to some extent is Lewis, Kimi, Max, and Charles. And Max showed what happened at Monaco if he can start to use the car again as he likes to drive a racing car and use the brakes going into a corner as he likes to drive a racing car, front row of the grid. Okay, we didn't see him race, but that just shows what happens. That's how far away, when you see Max now in Barcelona in the car that isn't energy rich for the lap, you see how much it's hurting his ability to be able to get the best even from a mediocre car. That's the direct comparison. Kimi, I think because the Mercedes is so good at the moment and has such good management of the way it deploys and harvested the power, that he's almost at the Monaco point at every race. Not quite, but it's not far away. That's why Kimi can do a lot more with the car than, say, Max Verstappen can do. And I think at Ferrari, they're certainly not where Mercedes are. They're a little bit ahead of Red Bull. But I think they're in that position where what Lewis wants to do with the car, which is not what Max wants to do, and equally it's not what Carlos Sainz wants to do. It's a little bit in between, and that's exactly where Ferrari are. And I think Lewis's style at the moment, which is just to let the car get in a little bit wider, just make sure he knows where he's going with the power, and then he's got incredible touch and feel in terms of applying the power, the steering rate, everything else, sort of right up there with the best of them. That's exactly what the car is capable of doing. And I think Charles is constantly trying to drive the way Max is trying to drive. And because he's not Max, actually, as we're seeing, he's a more emotional guy, as we've always known, more accident prone as a result. He's going off more. But he's trying to do what Max is doing in the Red Bull. And I think what Charles is doing in the Ferrari actually speaks to how well Max is driving. So I hope that kind of makes sense, because I think Lewis, you could say he's worked to get to that point. I think it's just a question of a lot of the things have all come together in this almost perfect storm for Lewis, that the way he wants to drive the car is actually how the car wants to be driven. It sounds a bit stupid, but I think that is the situation we're in. And then little things, you know, when he sees Charles starting to struggle to drive the car that way, it's a great feeling for Lewis. Of course it is. He's never going to say that. Of course he's going to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for Charles." You know, you say the right thing, don't you? But deep inside, as a racing driver, when you're blowing your teammate away and he's struggling to keep the car on the road, that's a great feeling for if you're the driver. Great feeling. And that's where Lewis is. And when one thing engenders another. And look at Kimi. Look how much better Kimi is now than he was at the start of the year, purely because he won a race. He got some confidence, and then the confidence built one race upon another. And now he's getting better and better with every race. And now he's mixing his incredible technical ability, if you like, that's the right phrase, with a Mansell-like racing aggression, which is amazing to watch. Every race, he's showing us something else that he can do, and Lewis is going to blossom, I think, like this. I think assuming things, they will continue on this path now. And if you look at the next race, Austria, which is a bit of a stupid circuit, it's just a rectangle and it's a sort of TV race with lots of crashes and everybody tries to survive the first corner. But that's a race Lewis could win as well, for sure, because it's a racer's race in the sense that it's going to be about a bit of strategy, a bit of overtaking, doing a nice job on the first corner, how quick you are when you're slightly offline, how you can recover the lap if you're a bit on the marbles here and hit the curb there. You know, all the things that Lewis is very good at doing, and he's never really been able to play with him the last few years because he's been so concerned, paranoid about, in the case of Mercedes, the bouncing and the physical drama of driving the car, and then a front end that goes away after one lap and flick oversteer when he doesn't want it. All the things that, and bear in mind, Lewis had never been subjected to any of that stuff. All the things that Mercedes threw at him from 22 onwards were shock, really. And that's why I think he reacted more to that than most, because he's just never really gone through that before. Now he's come out of it. He changed teams too late, in my opinion, but he changed teams and he's in the Ferrari now. And look, he's found his way. And he was always going to be mega quick. I always said, I still maintain that Ferrari didn't need to replace Carlos Sainz with Lewis Hamilton. They had a very good team, and the jury's out as to how Carlos would have been driving the car had he stayed. But that's just a hypothetical thing. It doesn't mean anything. In the same way that I always maintain that McLaren should have kept Daniel Ricciardo. They didn't need to hire Oscar Piastri. And I still maintain that. But having said that, like everybody else, I'm absolutely delighted for Lewis, because I've loved the way Lewis drives and the way he is as a human being ever since I met the guy in '06. So yeah, I think it's just one of the great moments in motorsport that he's now won in a Ferrari, and he won the way he did.
Yeah.
I want you to ask me now, Cameron, if he was lucky to win yesterday, because a few of my mates have said, "Oh, he was very lucky. It's just a one-off," which I don't agree with. But I want you to ask me that question in your own inimitable way.
Do you think then, Peter, Lewis' son's virtual safety car circumstance, that he still would have won the Barcelona Grand Prix yesterday?
Well, let me answer that by saying Ferrari messed it up again, didn't they? Because they should have brought him in as Fernando ground to a halt and the steam was pouring out of that Stroll car, the Stroll Honda. That's the moment, as they did when he brought him in for mediums. They just should have dragged him in from the second last corner straight into the pit lane, wham, and he would have come out with what sort of lead then? Job done. But they didn't. And he had to do another lap under VSC, which must have been excruciating, I would have thought, for the team anyway, if nothing else, praying that the VSC would continue. And yeah, he made it round at the end of that lap and came in, and just came out in front of the two Mercs, as we all know. So the question is, had there been no VSC, he was leading by 20 seconds when the VSC came out. That's how well he'd driven on those medium tires. I mean, it was an unbelievable stint by Lewis. That's what, in my opinion, won in the race, because he had the momentum, then he had the feel. And the question was the only question in my mind was how the Ferrari would feel on the hards. Because when you go from one compound to another, sometimes, quite often, particularly with Charles, actually more than Lewis, they say, oh, the car was terrible on this tire or that tire, brilliant on this tire. I'm not to those extremes, but you know what I'm saying. But the thing was, and then in answer to your question, how quick was Lewis on the hard tire at the end of the race? You know,
I mean,
just
blitzkrieg
disappeared, didn't he?
quick,
I mean, that was
incredibly quick.
obviously helped by the two Mercedes fighting one another, and but I don't know what George was doing all day. I mean, he should have, because that's the other thing you've got to say in answering your question. What were Mercedes doing? They've got the pole, they've got the first corner. In that situation, when you know it's going to be short stints because of the temperatures and the way the deg's going to come in, you know that you're in the best possible position to get the best possible gap and lead over the field in the opening phase. And I don't know what they were doing with George, why they didn't push George into going quicker in that first phase. He didn't have enough lead, obviously, and he never had enough lead at any stage as a result. And that was the problem. And he had Kimi there even to push him on, and it didn't do anything. I think that's, that was what needs to be borne in mind. And bearing in mind, Mercedes, in my opinion, made that mistake. Had there been no safety car, it's a moot point where Lewis would have come out. But let's assume he came out P3 just behind Kimi. He's on new hard tyres. Look how quick he was. And what would Kimi have done with George? Kimi would have done exactly what he did do, which is push George like crazy, not really listen to the radio, and then do an unbelievable pass into one, which he then held very well through 2 and 3, and then finally pulled off the pass in its completion going into 4. Whether he would have done that sooner, I don't know. But I'm willing to bet that when all that stuff was going on, Lewis would have gone boom, 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 and he would have won the race. Because a lot of people say, well, he would have had to have passed people. Okay, he would have had to have passed 2 Mercs that were fighting one another. So I think he would have won that race. Wow. Look how quick he was anyway.
He was ridiculously quick.
Partly the tyre age, but I mean, the car was good on the hards. That's the point. And for anybody that says Lewis was lucky, think about this. Ferrari made a mistake in not bringing him in a lap earlier under BSC. And that isn't luck. I mean, that's the opposite, isn't it? And yet he still won the race. So I don't even believe in luck anyway. There's always a cause and a reason for everything. And part of the reason for Lewis's win yesterday was Mercedes not being quick enough in the early phase of the race. Paranoid, I guess, about tyre deg and telling George to go no quicker than he needed to go in order to hold the lead or whatever they were saying. I don't know. But that's not the way to win, in my opinion, in past experience, in those sorts of 50-degree track temp on medium tyres around Barcelona. There's no way in the world you're going to get any sort of advantage over somebody on red tyres. And that's the other thing. I think Ferrari, Lewis, whoever it was, brilliant choice to start on the soft tyre. Absolutely. I mean, there's no way the medium was going to be more than a couple of laps longer than the soft. And quite a lot of people were saying to me, Ferrari messed up again. What a mistake. They only 2 on soft. Well, Max obviously was on soft. For Max, it was a no-brainer because he had the 2 new mediums in the garage, and why not get the softs out of the way so he can make a decent start? He needs all the help he can get off the line, doesn't he? So, yeah, no, I don't think he was lucky. I think Lewis won that race. And despite Ferrari messing it up a little bit, but then Ferrari made some great calls and great pit work and everything else. So you can't take that away from them. And where was Charles Leclerc, crashing and then P10 and Charles doing the opposite, it seemed, trying to extend the stints on a day when you really wanted, it was an undercut day, totally.
Yeah. Before we double click on Charles, let's put a bow in the Lewis Hamilton topic. 41 points adrift of the leader in the drivers' standings. 15 races left. Should we have a serious conversation about Lewis for the driver championship now, Pete?
Well, I don't think any drivers out there are thinking about the championship at this point. They're not even looking at the points. So Lewis wouldn't be thinking about that. He'd be only thinking about Austria now. I think he can win Austria. Mind you, I think both Mercedes drivers can win Austria, and I think maybe Max could luck into a win, and I think both McLarens could luck into a win. It's that sort of track. So it doesn't mean much. I'm not saying much. Silverstone, yeah, Lewis is not going to be slow at Silverstone, is he?
Oh, no.
Nor is Charles. I think by then Charles will have got his act. I think Charles in the race kind of got his act together again. He drove pretty well. Even though his strategy was wrong and his thinking was wrong, or the team were, he drove pretty well. And that to me was a sign that Charles kind of back there again, although the jury's out as to what, brakes he's going to be doing under braking and so forth. I don't know. I mean, you can't really say, it's not like another sport where you can say, is this athlete now going to respond to this win and go on and win other races? Because it's all to do with the team and the car.
Mm.
And yeah, Ferrari have got plenty of upgrades up their sleeve now, power wise. They've obviously got a half reasonable car. They definitely need more efficient downforce on slow circuits, I would say. So, in answer to your question, is the Ferrari capable of winning the World Championship? I would say no at the moment, because I don't think they're as aerodynamically efficient as the Mercedes or the McLaren. And I think the McLaren car was better than it looked yesterday, to be honest. Certainly in the hands of Oscar Piastri. And so, yeah, are Ferrari capable of beating Mercedes to the championship? I doubt it very much, which effectively means I don't think Lewis can win the championship. But that's not to say I don't think Lewis, as a human being, as an individual, wouldn't have the skill level to win the championship. Of course he has, always has had. And so has Charles, and so has George, and so has Kimi, and Max, obviously. So, you can't ask a question. I'm going to say you can't. I mean, the question is not, can Lewis win the championship? It is, do Ferrari have a car that will now take them to the championship ahead of the Mercedes? And if you phrase it like that, I don't think anyone will say, oh yeah, they're much better than Mercedes now. Are they going to say that? No, I don't think they are.
But they, in proportions yesterday, they
Well,
looked in the
yeah,
hands of Lewis.
and if that compression ratio thing has had an effect, but don't forget, Mercedes have an upgrade. They've got a nice upgrade up their sleeve now. I mean, that's a huge thing, in my opinion. Red Bull don't. Assuming that all gets ratified, which I guess it will. I know Red Bull are protesting it at the moment. As much as you can protest something like that, I'm not sure you can protest it, can you? But yeah, Mercedes have a power upgrade up their sleeve,
and Ferrari too.
Yeah, but Mercedes are already very good,
Yeah,
and they got
agreed,
an upgrade
agreed.
to
Yeah,
make
you are
up for the
correct.
loss of the compression ratio thing. So don't get, let's not get too carried away. And as I say, there was a bit of strategy nonsense with Mercedes yesterday, in my opinion. So it was a little bit of a weird thing. And then, they did actually, I mean, for sure, Kimi was quicker than George, wasn't he, back into the race? And look how good that Mercedes was in the hands of Kimi until it stopped. I mean, that's another factor, isn't it?
Oof. Yeah, a
Mercedes
little
got
bit.
some unreliability. There's no question. Now that's three sort of shutdowns. If you
Yeah.
George, Canada, Lando twice, Canada, and I don't know what happened in Canada. Was it gearbox in Canada with Lando? I don't know, or was it
I can't
hydraulics or something?
remember. I can't
Anyway,
remember.
Lando, Monaco, and then Kimi now.
Australia.
Oh yeah.
But Pete,
So
but
that.
Pete,
Mm.
Peter, before we talk about Mercedes and George and Kimi, I just want to ask you on Shaw, because again, we've all said that he's fantastically quick. Now I want to say he's like 15, 16 points adrift of Lewis, making mistakes all over the shop, doesn't know what brakes and pads he needs or wants. Having just
Imagine if
signed
you were conducting his debrief at Maranello tomorrow morning,
a
saying all that, Cameron. He'd love all that, wouldn't he?
positive always, Peter. But
Yeah.
that's the truth. It feels like I feel like every time Charles signs an extension, it's almost like his performance is cursed. And by the way, we have this conversation underneath the aegis that he's one of the quickest drivers in Formula One. What's happened with Charles Leclerc's stock, Peter? Why has he become so bad over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think it's, as I said, to me, that Ferrari doesn't have a great front end yet. And, but it's not bad. And it's pretty good on everything else. It's got pretty good power. Its stopping power, the way Lewis uses it, is very good. Transmission's very good. The way they run the car now, deployment, the way they manage the car is pretty good. So it's a pretty good race car. The one thing it doesn't have is what Charles Leclerc always needs in order to do what he wants to do, and that is a front end that he can really use going into corners. And he doesn't have that. And whereas Lewis can use the front end when everything's very stable and nice and it's the right sort of corner for him, and he's got the eye for it. When he's not in that, when that's not the case, he's very good still at doing what he does in a fairly conventional way, which is, braking in a straight line, getting the power on nice and early, holding the slide, the drift, there's a little bit there, feeling the car on the rear, and keeping it all silky smooth in a very consistent, logical way. Whereas Charles doesn't like driving on the rear of the car. Simple as that. He doesn't, that's not how he feels a racing car. He feels the front of the car. He doesn't right now, because he's obviously lost confidence. I don't think he's able to generate anything like the same sweet spot, even when he's got grip, that say Max could generate at Monaco. And because everything's quite edgy with Charles at the moment. I never saw him drive as badly as he drove in qualifying. And I was saying that in FP3, let alone Q1, Q2, and then obviously Q3. Massively abrupt turn to the left for 3, and then very wide turn into 3. Everything was sort of very staccato, and he's driving. And it was almost like, I'm just going to get on top of this car. It's not doing what I want it to do, because he couldn't get the front to work. And then, as I understand it, as we all understand it, and on top of that was compounded by running a different brake setup for Barcelona, which is basically Lewis's brake setup, which is very good high-speed, heavy braking, very good retardation, very good temperature control, that's logical temperature control, not a lot of moving up and down with the temperatures that you can't anticipate, and allowing Lewis to do what he does, just brake in a very stable way. That's when I say Lewis isn't a late braker. What he is an incredible field breaker. If there's a slight bump that is there where he wants to brake, he will either brake just a little bit before it to make sure the car's not going to be disturbed by that bump. He's got incredible feel for brake cadence, and that's been one of his hallmarks and trademarks throughout his career. It's not about late braking for Lewis. It's all about stability into the corner. And it always has been, and it still is today. And with Charles, he's never really had to think about that, because that's not what he does. He's probably half a meter inside that bump already, and then he's trying to get the car to stop, and he doesn't have a front end, and then the back end snaps out. That's what's going on. And then he thought, well, stuff that. I'm slow in Canada. I'll put on, we'll put on those brakes that Lewis has got for my car for Spain. And the way those brakes, quite clearly, I guess that, CI bias brakes, not CI completely, maybe Brembo calipers still, I don't know, but something like that. Those brakes want to be driven more or less in a straight line. That's what they're built for. High speed, hard braking, very good temperature resistance. And Charles not into that at all. He just wants the feel of the pedal. And he's probably got less feel through the brake pedal with those brakes than he would have had he remained with 100% Brembo, or whatever system he had before. I guess it was pretty near to 100% Brembo. And so, I don't know what happened overnight. I thought it was significant that they changed brake friction materials front and rear after the shunt on the Saturday night. And I can understand, front brakes damaged and all that stuff, but rear brakes as well. It's interesting, isn't it, that they changed all that. Now, whether they just went to a different type of CI friction material, or maybe more, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're not allowed to go to a different manufacturer, Brembo. But is that the case? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're not. I'm just assuming they're not, because it's quite difficult actually to find. It just says, you cannot change major components. But if it's an accident, maybe the jury's out on that. And how would they know? That's what I'm really getting to say.
Yeah.
I'm not in any way suggesting this happened, but how would they know if they went back to Brembo? If there are no logos anywhere and all the rest of it, I don't know. Maybe they've got barcodes. I've got no idea. I'm probably talking through my hat. But to me, he definitely had a better car on Sunday, and he was doing more with the car, and he looked more like Charles on Sunday, in my opinion.
Yeah, not a bad overtake round the outside of Oscar Piastri, worthy of mention.
What's Oscar Piastri doing right now? Where are all the Oscar Piastri fans that were giving everybody a hard time when they were deigned to suggest that Lando might win the championship last year? What are the Oscar Piastri fans saying at the moment? That he's absolutely getting screwed by McLaren. Is that it?
But I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit journalistic trope, isn't it, Peter? What else could it possibly be? I mean, it couldn't be the fact that he's struggling in his. No, absolutely could have. But he's a bloody good driver, isn't he?
Well,
Peter?
he is a good driver,
and
that's the disappointing thing. And he's a laconic, monosyllabic Australian that just keeps his mind clear of things. He's not a high profile guy that wastes his time on rubbish. He's a good bloke, and he drives really well, or used to. And
Oh,
as I've said many times, to me the best Oscar Piastri was, apart from obviously the first half of last year, but even then I don't think he was driving quite as early into the turn-in points as he was the year before. And that was the best. And then the problem for Oscar, as I always predicted it would happen, on both sides of the garage, was that the minute Lando started to go a little bit quicker here or there, they would start looking at telemetry from one another, and he would start to adapt his style to what Lando was doing. And he got right away from all that lovely finessey stuff he was doing, and he's now a sort of Lando clone, -1. And I'm amazed, absolutely amazed, that he didn't get on top of that last winter and do 25 days with Rob Wilson, just to make sure he understood about how talented he was and how he could use that talent to shorten the corners, and to extend the straights, more importantly. And the straights are shorter for him now because he's usually loading up the rear, and he's got a bit of a jink going on, and that's where it's all gone. Lando's got that natural feel of trying to get the straights as long as possible and get the car straight, and he's got a lovely soft touch. But Oscar's, hasn't got that at the moment. I don't think there's any team less likely to favour one driver than McLaren, actually. And especially if they've just won the championship with Lando, even more reason for them to try and want to win a championship with Oscar. And yet it's not happening. So you can't blame McLaren for this. Maybe
no.
the departure of Piers Thin, I don't know. I'm being slightly cynical there because I'm a great fan of Piers Thin, and I think it's a huge mistake for McLaren to have let him go as their sort of operations guy who manages the entire flow of manufacturing and flow of parts into the race team. And then they let him go because he's wasn't enough of a yes man, apparently, to all the different departments, and now he's at Williams. So that should transform Williams, I would have thought, in terms of spares and getting the car more reliable.
And faster one day, maybe.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, that's another point, isn't it? They've got more power coming, so there's no excuse for Williams at all. They should be, right up there with Alpine, if not ahead of Alpine every race, shouldn't they? But they're not. And
Yeah.
it's not good.
Just before, I just finally on Shaw, there
Mm.
was a conversation that Lewis had post quali, where
Hmm.
he said words. He was asked about the brakes and Charles' mistake, and he said something to the effect of he thinks Charles was trying to basically brake as he did. There's a theory going around, Peter, that Ferrari have been super conservative with their brake disc, bigger than most, and so in 2026, when it's really important to get the brakes in the optimal temperature window, that's what Charles is struggling with as versus Lewis, less aggressive with his brakes, therefore getting and keeping less heat in them. To that, Peter, you respond how, sir?
Well, what Lewis said makes complete sense. In other words, he's trying to start. I'm not sure he sees life this way, but the reality is, as I said, Charles is trying to, with these different brake setup, he's trying to brake as Lewis brakes, which means more in a straight line, which Charles not very good at. Yes, he's a late breaker for sure, and he probably likes that feel, but it doesn't help him going into corners, and that's where the frustration is. And as for the point about temperature, maybe I'm not technically adept enough really to understand it, but as I understand it, they've never used the rear brakes less than they are now, and therefore temperature's not an issue. It's all about that they can't use the rear brakes because they're using it for power regeneration, and that's why guys like Max, can't do anything special with the car. And the only guy that can out there who of that type of driver is Kimi, because Mercedes are so good at all that harvesting. But I think that's the point. I mean, the rear brakes barely get used, do they?
Yeah, fair.
So I don't
So fair.
understand all that stuff about temperature. And the front brakes, well, normal thing. It's not that difficult to control front brake temperatures these days. I mean, even Cadillac eventually got on top of it, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah, apparently. Go on then, Peter. Let me ask you
Hmm.
about Max Verstappen. I've just seen news come down the wire that certain journalists are saying that Max Verstappen has signed another year for Red Bull, potentially rumouring speculation at this juncture. I watched the Barcelona Grand Prix thinking that there's no way that Max will stay at this team another year. Of course, there was the big meeting between Max and all of the key C-suite exec Red Bull stakeholders. Charlie Mavidi was there, so too Mark Mateschitz, and Helmut Marko turned up. And there's a rumor that he was about to effect for his performance clause at the summer break. Um, do you think Max has enough patience, Peter, being a fire breathing dragon, living only to win races, particularly F1, that he will stay at Red Bull, given how god awful that RB22 is?
Uh, it's a good question because we're getting to the point now where Windsor needs to, actually stand up and be counted. Because last year, whenever there was talk and lots of chat last year about Max going to Mercedes or this or that, mainly Mercedes, I always said, well, for sure he's going to want to see what happens in 26 to see where Red Bull are at. They may have a great car, they may have a terrible car, they may have a mediocre car, and that obviously then needs to be put up against with what teams logically he could go to anyway. And so here we are, mid 26. So stand up and be counted. I mean, the first question is, what are the options? Yes, maybe Mercedes would take him and pay him a lot of money. But given what is going on with Kimi and how great a job Kimi's doing, and how they've found, in a way, another Max for the future, would they really want to put Max up against Kimi and cramp Kimi's style? Cramp Max's style as well, because believe me, there's no way he would just destroy Kimi Antonelli. No, no chance. He will, a bit like, he will over a season, and he will race to race, but Kimi is quick. And we know how quick George is. Look at Lewis Hamilton yesterday, and figure in the fact that George destroyed Lewis at Mercedes. What does that tell you about George? He's not slow. And what's Kimi doing to George? Kimi's quick, and that would be in Max's mind. Not that he would be. He of course would be confident that he would beat Kimi. Of course, he wouldn't get out of bed otherwise. But is it going to be? Yeah, maybe he'll do it. Maybe just he'll want that challenge for the first time in his life. Some guy who's super quick in the other car, and it's always there. And he may be thinking, as I get a bit older, that's what I need to keep me sharp, and I'll be an even better driver at the end of 28 or whenever he's going to go. Maybe he will. As I think I said that to you in the last live stream. So I think that's the only option, isn't it? Ferrari, everyone would want him. Ferrari would want him, but then what would they think? Well, Lewis just won a race. We've just re-signed with Charles. Earliest we could really sign Max would be maybe end of 27, So I can't imagine him going there next year, replacing Lewis. So that's that out. McLaren, yeah, I can see Zach thinking, we've got a pretty good race car. What these two guys doing? Get rid of one of them at least, put him in a McLaren. But then you're almost in the realm of, well, is he better off there than Red Bull? At least he's got, their own powertrain. He's a Mercedes customer all of a sudden. He's at McLaren. The whole Zach Brown thing's a bit, annoying. And, would he want to do all that stuff? I don't know. So then you end up, well, I'll stay where I am, 1 year deal. I can't imagine do more than a 1 year deal if he does stay, but I think he might. I think he will do that, because I don't see what else makes sense for him. Get a lot more money, I suppose, out of Red Bull along the way. Do that, sort of compensate for the car not being very good and being the driver he is, and maybe get Red Bull to do a few other things that allow him to have some fun. To get a bit of bigger budget for his dad's rally program, get a few more GT3 races sorted out. Maybe run a 2-car team, some of his mates in the other car, all that stuff, have some fun, enjoy it. And if Red Bull, he's shown at Monaco that, you've only got to have one energy-rich circuit, and all of a sudden he's still Max Verstappen. And where that could be Hungary, it could be Hungary. Where else? A couple of other places, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, Peter, this is I can't believe that Max would stay there for another, if of course he has the option to go to Mercedes.
I understand where you're coming from, but then where is he going to go?
I thought the Mercedes potentially, if George, and again, this is the next conversation that we're going to have, if George loses to Kimi Antonelli, that his 1+1 contract just goes away, fades to black.
Yeah, that is a possibility. As I say, to me, I'm not sure he would do that. I'm not sure Toto would do that. Maybe he
Oh,
would. I mean, George is actually handling everything pretty well, isn't he?
go on then. Let's speak to this, Peter, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure he is. If I'm on it, like from a psychological perspective, 1000%. I had George. I had this being the weekend that we see the George resurgence proper. That this is there's no excuse. Miami, he's never been a Miami specialist. Monaco, yeah, doesn't suit him. Too many low minimum speed turns, etc., etc. China, okay, setup issues. Japanese Grand Prix, the time in the safety car screwed him over. Reliability issues like those are all anomalies that you've got to normalize for. But finally, now at the Barcelona circuit, the Catalonia, I'm expecting to see George Russell put Kimi Antonelli in his place. He's 19 years old. It's his sophomore season, and now this is a thoroughbred George Russell track. His aggressive, smooth, geometric racing line approach, a la Jenson Button or whatever, will come to the fore, and nobody will be able to keep with him. Kimi Antonelli included. Qualifying went as expected for me, Peter. Point 3, point 4 down the road from Kimi Antonelli. Perfect. We are here. George Russell is himself again. And then all of a sudden, in the race, Peter, what I didn't expect to see or stamp on my bingo card was Kimi Antonelli gapping, in inverted commas, George Russell, and then nailing him on track, Peter. What are we looking at? This is bonkers,
Well,
Peter.
in your look back, you didn't mention Canada, but Canada was an important race because that's another George circuit, and that would have been a place where he expected to, it would all be back to normal again. And look what Kimi did in Canada. And I'm not talking about the points he came away with. I'm talking about how he pushed George and how he raced with George. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday. We saw Kimi racing beautifully against George. So all of this actually is about how good Kimi is. And George is about where he is, should be, and has been on circuits like Canada and Barcelona. And bear in mind that as he was doing his slowdown lap after his Q3 lap that made him P3, Kimi Antonelli said, I lost all power coming out of the last corner. So how many people factored that in to the race? That's a pretty quick lap when you're losing power out of the last corner because of the 26 regs. So that was one thing. And then I do think George was a victim of poor strategy in the first phase of the race. I think they should have been pushing him much harder to pull out a gap over Lewis. If it was Kimi behind him, it would have been difficult for George because Kimi would have matched him all the way. But he would have done that over Lewis for sure, because although Lewis was quick, he was on the soft tyre and he hadn't got the lead at the start, which was the main reason for running them. And so therefore he was going to be in a bit of a tyre conservation mode. That was pretty clear. Try and extend that first stint as long as possible. So that was a perfect golden moment for George to disappear and have an 8-10 second lead. And he didn't. And that's I don't think you can blame George for that. I think he had the pace to do that, but they just didn't let him do it for whatever reason. Oh, we're worried about tyre deg or whatever, What? They got 3 laps more out of the tyres than Lewis got out of the softs, 2 laps. So it was a complete non-starter, that strategy, in my opinion. And so it was. And then, of course, what we saw second half of the race, once the fuel was out of the car and everything was settled and Kimi had a bit of free track in front of him, he wasn't looking at a red Ferrari anymore, all over George. And this is the point. Contrary to what apparently Toto has said, I can tell you now, Kimi for sure has the tyres squarer to the road for longer over any lap of any circuit than George Russell. And he will therefore, by definition, be better on tyre deg. He won't be loading up the left front or the left rear as much as a George will. Everything's squarer. And he's beautiful. The way he brakes, slightly gentle and then applies the brakes. You very rarely see Kimi ragged under braking, and he's very, very accurate under braking. And he's an earlier turn-in driver. So actually, physically, over the lap, he uses less road than George as well. So car for car, wheel for wheel, lap for lap, how's George going to beat Kimi now? As I said at the start of the year, I said, well, he's not around slow corners, but George is going to come to his into his element through turn 9 in Barcelona. I think it was one corner where I always said, but Kimi therefore would get him through 2-3. But guess what? I mean, Kimi was a little bit slower through 9, as I predicted. Mid corner, he wasn't quite as quick as George. But then George is probably the quickest guy mid corner on a fast corner in Formula One right now, I would think. He and Charles Leclerc. And it doesn't add up to much, because doing that, he's actually putting more load through the car, and he's actually using the tyres a little bit more doing that. I'm not saying that he's not quick. He is. He's super quick there. But Kimi, why is Kimi a little bit slower there? Probably because he's giving me a little bit of a feather going in, a bit more of a feather going in of the throttle, and because he wants the car to be squarer to the road. And that's what you're seeing. You did see George coming back. He did come back. But all of a sudden, he's got Kimi Antonelli in the other car doing magical things. And on top of that, he's got Kimi Antonelli doing, I don't know, I keep saying Nigel Mansell. I mean, other people will have their, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo, if you like, Daniel Ricciardo, Nigel Mansell-esque track craft. And, you know, the beauty of Kimi's pass was not necessarily what he did breaking into turn 1. It was how then he predicted and knew exactly what George was going to do through 1, 2, and 3. And he covered everything. He went much wider into 3 than he normally would, because he knew George was going to try and do something there. And once he knew he was on the power out of 3, then he knew all he had to do was just turn in earlier to 4, or turn in normally to 4, and he knew George would be a little bit wide, and bang, he was gone 2-3 tenths straight away. And it was an absolutely perfect, beautiful piece of driving against one of the great racers in Formula One, George Russell. You know, he's a serious guy. I mean, would you want to be alongside George Russell going into a 5th gear right-hander?
I had no chance, Peter.
No,
What for?
exactly.
Not if I could help it.
Nor would I. Yeah, I can think of a few drivers I might sort of wave to, but George Russell, no, thank you.
No, he's
no. The guy's steely-eyed, mega quick, very brave, and there's Kimi all over him.
He's
that's what's going on. But as I say, you know, it's a bit like, you know, of course Lewis will win more races, and of course Lewis was going to win races this year if the Ferrari was a winning car, which it is. Lewis could win Austria. George could easily win Austria, and Kimi could fail to score. And what's everybody going to say then? Oh, Kimi's off the boil. Kimi's lost the plot. Kimi's momentum's gone. You know, take each race as it comes. Don't worry about the championship. It's a long way to go. Maybe when we get to Brazil, you can start looking at the points and see where everybody is.
It's a good shout, but I mean, we can't resist being prisoners of the now, Peter. I'm trying to forward.
Well, Sterling Moss could. He never agreed with the point system at all. Didn't want a point system. Just wanted each race taken as in its own merit. I think the whole world should press pause and do that for a while.
It's hard to resist the allure of trying to understand who's going to win this championship. And for me, Peter, I always thought George has the experience. He's a points accumulator, Mr. Consistency, Mr. Saturday, that he'll, again, as we go into the European leg of the circuit, I thought I expected to see this points tally, now 50 points between George and Kimi in 3rd and 1st for the driver's standings. I expected to see that sort of points gap dwindle like that every single weekend, DNFs notwithstanding, and I'm having to reappraise for that now, Peter. I think this Kimi Antonelli fella is a little bit, is a little bit different. You've said it right, Peter. So it's not just him being fast or clutch. It's about him having that Nigel Mansell racing gene, isn't it? He put the fear of God into George. I didn't see this, Peter. This is a black swan.
Well, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. No way. I mean,
No.
I never imagined he was that good a racer. We saw it for the first time, I think, where was it? Miami, I think, didn't we? He was pretty racy there. And then Canada, there was no reason for him after Miami to be as aggressive as he was with George. And yet he did. He was. And I thought it was so funny yesterday, because I can't imagine Mercedes actually thought that Kimi would do that, because they never said at any point, don't pass him, because they just never imagined that he would. They just kept saying to George, go a bit quicker, George, if you can. And there's Kimi saying, I've got more pace in the car, which is a nice way of saying, what is George doing? And there's no response to anything. So he does it, as Nigel would. Sorry, Patrick, what was that? Yeah,
Pull the
and it was
headphones
it
up.
was almost the double dummy, wasn't it? The Nigel Mansell into Stowe double dummy.
It is a good
It
shout.
was it was a superb piece of driving, and he was
He,
on the marbles.
I was just about to say, and he stayed on it.
Oh,
Uh,
and that's how
Like,
good he is under braking. That's how good his judgment and feel is.
he's not bad, this Kimi
No,
fella,
and I can tell
Peter.
you now, even more so, George will not be thinking of the championship. He'll be the other guy. He'll say, "Oh no, the only way, race by race, I've got to win Austria. I'm not going to care about the points. I'm going to win this, but I'm going to win it by not thinking about it." That's what he'll be thinking. If you see what I mean, which is okay. That's the right way to think, probably. But yeah, that's why I think outside the sport, outside the bubble of these drivers, I think we all, well, some of us, most of us, probably get carried away with the whole points thing, and how important it is, and we're always thinking about it. And if they do that and we get the graphics on screen as they currently stand, these will be the new points, and it's 103 here, 109. It's very difficult to work out what it really means in terms of gaps, and how many wins or P2s or P3s separate them. But they love doing all that because it's good TV, a bit like a bank corner in Madring. Doesn't mean a lot. It's not a great test of driver skill, but it looks great on TV. And so it goes on. But the great drivers do just think one race at a time, one element at a time. And Max will be thinking, yeah, I got half a chance in Austria. I'll be in trouble with the old deployment, but make up for it with a bit of argy-bargy first corner, get a lap in, let everybody else hit the curbs. I'll try and be neat and tidy, or whatever he's thinking. And he'll be there or thereabouts, I suspect, in Austria. But despite no upgrades, I mean,
Oh,
that to me, I'm still staggered by that. It's so funny, isn't it? That how many people last year were saying, "Oh, Max, he's going to leave Red Bull because the engine's going to be terrible. Red Bull powertrains, they've got no idea what they're doing. What a load of rubbish!" And here they are, the best engine in Formula One.
do you
Let's
believe
hear
that
it
though,
for Phil
Peter?
Prue.
Do you think
Uh,
that's true?
uh, well, first of all, I always said, do not underestimate that engine. It'll be a very good power unit. I always said that, and you can look back through all my live streams. Point one. Point two, bear in mind, this is only referring to the internal combustion engine. And why is it only referring to the internal combustion engine? Which you think is actually quite stupid, really, because the new element is the electrical side. So if anything, if Formula One really wanted to have equality, they would be allowing the teams, the engine, the power suppliers, the power unit suppliers, who don't have great electrics at the moment, to have a few upgrades and do a little bit more work on the electrical side so that they have a really closely run championship. But that's not it. The reason they have this thing in the first place is because they want all the ICE engines basically to be similar so that everybody can see the differences between the electrical parts of the car, because this is an electric Formula One. That's what they want. They want to highlight the electric development or not. It's unbelievable, isn't it, that they would
No, you
think that
don't.
way? Why wouldn't they just do the complete power unit as
In
distinct from just the ICE? Doesn't make
it's
any sense to me at all, other than that they're misguided and think that people love the thought of an electric Formula One.
oh no, Peter,
Well, that's
that's
the truth. That is the reality of why it is this.
oh no, they've misread the room if that's the case. Sadly,
Well, of course
uh,
they have. They've misread the fans, that's for sure.
just a tad, just a tad. To put a bow on Mercedes, though,
Mm.
Peter, I wanted to ask you: did Toto make a mistake? Um, he's long been of the thought process that the drivers should be allowed to fight until they're going to sacrifice themselves the top step on the podium. Did in allowing Kimi to harass George, did they jeopardise the top step of the podium yesterday? And should Toto have called it and said, "Listen, George, Kimi Antonelli's is faster than you"?
Well, as I say, I don't think around Barcelona in that situation, I don't think they imagined that Kimi would do what he did. So I think that's why they didn't make that call. I think from now on, so long as Kimi's within, I don't know what, 4 seconds of George, they're always going to be concerned that Kimi's going to have a go at him, because they've learnt their lesson now. The pit lane guys, that is. He will have a go because he's that good. And so, and Kimi will be aware of that. He can get away with doing that in Canada. He can get away with doing that here. Is he going to be able to get away with that forevermore? They're going to see it being, I mean, the fact that he's leading the championship makes it more difficult, doesn't it? I mean, if George was 15 points in front of Kimi right now, it would be quite easy for Mercedes to say to Kimi, because he's a young kid, just take it easy. If you win in 3 seconds, and unless we give you the go ahead, do not try to pass George. They could do that, and he'd probably be reluctantly go and sulk and say, yeah, okay. But they can't do that because he's leading the world championship. It's a great situation for Formula One. It's a great storyline because they can't do that. And so what can Toto do? What can Toto do? You know, it's, I would love to be in his position actually, because I often said, you know, you should always have a well-balanced team where you don't have this problem. You should have Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, not Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri. I've always said that. And you would imagine George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, great team. It's quite clear that George is the senior faster driver and Kimi's learning quickly and he's very talented, but they're always going to be pretty harmonious in the way they go about their race performances. But what do you do now? All you can do is sit back and enjoy, to be honest. There's nothing he can do because he can't tell Kimi not to race the way he wants to race because he's leading the championship. And it's a wonderful situation. We should all enjoy it. I thought it was interesting. Sorry to interrupt, Cameron. No, I thought it was interesting, and this is only one of the viewers of the stream we were doing yesterday saying that, Peter, what do you think of the comments from Toto that George drives very softly and smoothly and always gets the best from the car, great on tire management, whereas Kimi is very aggressive and abrupt and throws the car around and he's much harder on tires. Paraphrasing now. My reaction was, well, either Toto was joking or he doesn't know what he's looking at, or, and I think this is possibly more the point, he's saying that to make George feel quite good at the moment. Because imagine if he said the opposite. If somebody said to him, compare the two stars of your two drivers, Toto, and he said the opposite. He said, well, you know, Kimi's very smooth, very good on tire management, brilliant under braking, so accurate, very good in traffic, incredible feel for track craft. George is a little bit spikier, a little bit wider on turn-in, a little bit harder on tire management, but pretty good view of the race overall, good racer, makes good starts. But, you know, that's it in a nutshell. How do you think George Russell's going to feel if Toto says that? And then Toto gets misquoted, as he obviously would. What impact would that have on George's morale, do you think?
I mean, he'd feel like an absolute champion, of course, Peter.
Well, exactly. So that's why Toto would never say. That's probably why he said the opposite, because he knows young Kimi knows the reality of life and isn't going to get worried by anything that Toto says.
You know, Peter, that makes me feel a semblance of empathy to George's circumstance, because he's got to race Kimi hard. He has to get his elbows out now. He's chasing this generational talent in Mr. Antonelli.
Yeah.
But he can't do that because Toto won't stand for that. Toto's allergic to a 2016 Nico Lewis Hamilton Barcelona Grand Prix circumstance. He doesn't want them crashing into each other. But I think surely for George now, being that he's 50 points adrift, he almost has to have that attitude. That's getting your elbows out and rubbing his racing is almost a cost of George Russell business because of where he finds himself at in the championship now.
But I've actually got two numbers here for Rob. One is mobile and one's the home number for Rob Wilson. So I don't know. Does George want both, or is he happy just with the mobile? Bear in mind, he doesn't always answer the mobile because A, he's got a big operation coming up, and B, it's an old Nokia that's fallen off the roof of his car about 400 times. But it does work, George.
Please advise.
Well, it is. It's all about the technique, isn't it? No. There's no, I mean, I keep saying, I've said it many times already on my thing. To me, right now, Kimi Antonelli is driving exactly like Alain Prost. And I'm talking technically in corners now. I'm not talking about I think potentially he's better than Alain. Well, potentially, I think he's already better than Alain in terms of his track craft and his ability to overtake and look for opportunities. But in terms of how he actually places the car, uses the brakes, uses the steering, the absolute dead ringer of Alain Prost. Dead ringer.
Blimey.
And I say that as somebody that saw Alain's entire driving career in Formula One.
I was just about to say, Peter, that's some
yeah,
praise.
He is. He's Alain Prost. That's exactly how he drives the car. And in a way, George is Ayrton. Not quite as consistent, not quite as precise, but not that far from the way Ayrton liked to create corners and the way he drove. And I'm not saying George, I mean, people, Ayrton would be quicker than George Russell, but George Russell is quick. Ayrton was quick, very, very quick, but Alain could beat him. and often
Yeah.
did.
He's not a bad peddler. Oh, Peter, finally, as we round third, I wanted to ask you very quickly about this Pierre Gasly third place reinstatement at
Yeah.
Monaco. Um, I read that, and again, conjecture and speculation, that they measure the speed. So a 60.1 kilometers per hour, whatever it was
Hmm.
the alleged infringement speed of Pierre Gasly in the pit lane.
I think that
And
was Lewis's as well.
yeah, there was like four of them that were 60.1, which
Yeah.
feels, I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test,
No.
that does it,
No.
as you rightfully said at the time. But I've heard that it was that what they've done is take the barrier in, the entry into the pit lane ever so slightly, meaning therefore that the drivers were travelling less distance than the FOM and the FIA had got down. So again, when they were doing their calculation, speed equals distance over time, the numerator for distance they had as a larger number, and therefore were misreading the time, the speed that they were going through the pit lane. How can the FOM/FIA be this bad, Peter? Why do they do these things and almost forget that they changed, or that the Monaco guys had changed the angle of attack and therefore the distance going in to
But
the
I
to
don't
the
think
pit
they
lane?
changed it between qualifying and the race, though, did they? This was compared with last year. You're talking about,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Well, I mean, to me, that's nonsense because regardless of where the loops are, the teams calibrate during practice, Friday particularly, to make sure they obviously have a margin on Friday and they calibrate exactly how to set the speed limiter based on the readings they're getting. So regardless of whether or not they move the barrier, it's irrelevant because everything is related to what is going on that day, and that takes you through the next 3 days of the weekend. Now, I suspect it was worse than that. I think there was something wrong with the calibration system. Now, that maybe it was because there was a variable in there to do with the angle at which the cars came past a barrier or something like that. But if that's the case, that would have shown up on Friday and Saturday. And that makes it even more unconscionable that when the stewards during the race said, "What is going on? This can't be right. This is completely absurd. We've had 3 drivers now point one over." The word came back, "The system is perfect. There are no problems with the system." That is the real issue here. And that is one of the reasons, I'm sure, immediately, without any compunction, they gave Pierre back his P3. But there's another problem, which is that only Pierre got the correct result. What about the other guys that made pit stops? Well, sorry, what about the guys that made pit stops and served their penalty in the pit stops? And this is completely ridiculous. That system needs to be revisited now, because if there are going to be inaccuracies, like if it's happened once, it can happen again. And there has to be some recourse now. If you serve your penalty in the pit lane, how do you undo that? You know, that's the problem, and it's not good. I think it's terrible, actually. It's a terrible indictment, and I think Formula One should, well, not F1, who is it? FOM timing, whatever, should penalise itself $1 million and split that money between the teams that had to serve the penalty. Not Pierre Gasly, obviously, because he's got his P3 now, but the others. There should be something like that. I'm obviously being, supercilious, but there should be something like that, because it shouldn't just be, there's so many penalties in Formula One for this or that. Oh, he moved under braking, did this, did that, lost the race. And yet something enormous like this happens. Or the whole lite procedure, the starting procedure in Canada, what happened there?
Yeah.
That was
And
just as, significant in a way as the penalty thing, because it's all to do with electronics and loops and systems and everything else, isn't it?
mm,
How do we
uh,
know, following the start light fracas in Canada, that all the loops on the grid were working perfectly? How do we know that? What
we
comfort
don't.
do we have for that?
I know we don't, Peter. I think we're better off assuming that they don't work at this juncture.
Or we bring back Toto Roche and we have a big fat man with a flag starting the race, and he's walking around the front of the grid, pointing at drivers, telling him to get back and do this. And then suddenly, when they're least expecting, he just whips the flag down. Mega. And you've got
might
guys at
might
the back already doing 100 miles an hour.
oh,
Bring it
might
back.
be
Bring it on.
might
It's all
might
too
be
it's all too vanilla, isn't it? They're trying to be too perfect in a sport that is imperfect, because there's so much going on. There's so many cars, so many drivers, so much electronic activity in the air. so many differences from circuit to circuit, particularly when you go to a street track like Monaco. Everybody's expecting perfection. We need to come back a little bit from that. And it's the same with the engine regulations. We wanted perfection. We wanted 50% electricity, 50% ice. And a Formula One car cannot deliver that, not without front axle regeneration. And yet they wanted that. So they went for it. And now we're backpedaling, not backpedaling enough. But there's too many decisions about the future and the way we run Formula One based on we are perfect. We can do no wrong. And that's why we're in a lot of the trouble we're in. I'm surprised, Cameron, you haven't asked me about Alex Albon's helmet livery.
What do you think? Surely a brilliant homage to your old mate Nige. You
Really?
didn't think?
I've never seen that livery going in wider to corners ever in the history of that livery. I think the livery must have been wondering, what is going on here? The turning point was 5 meters back. What's going on here? I'm surprised that, that Alex didn't get a little bit of the energy from that livery and start driving a little bit earlier into corners. Yes, he's got a nice touch. He's almost got a Nigel touch in terms of his steering inputs, and he's very soft. But his corners are so long compared with Nigel's. And, I think when drivers start running the liveries of other drivers, great drivers from the past, they should take into account how those drivers drove and make sure they do justice to that livery in the style in which they're doing it. It's quite logical, shout. Isn't it?
It's a good shout, Peter. I suppose Alex would say that Williams aren't giving him the machinery using which he can replicate for somebody like Nigel Mansell.
He's never driven like that in any car he's ever raced in his life. So how does that matter? I'm not criticizing Alex for what for who he is, his style. He's a great guy, great driver, and he can get a lot out of a car if it's a very good car. He can win a Grand Prix probably. Well, for sure, he can win a Grand Prix in a good car. All I'm saying is, if you're going to put Nigel Mansell's livery on your helmet, at least, do the livery a bit of justice and start getting a bit earlier to the corners.
Yeah.
I'm obviously being completely facetious. Don't take this seriously. I just that livery obviously means a lot to me, and I just thought it was quite funny that of all the drivers that was going to wear it, it was Alex Albon, one of the widest turn-in drivers you can possibly have on the grid.
If you've got to wear it, you must try and do it justice, I suppose.
Well, he did do it justice. I mean, at least he did it. And I'm being serious now. It was great to see it there again. Great to see Williams actually acknowledging the existence of Nigel Mansell. So, that was something, if nothing else.
We'll take it. And on that bombshell, Mr. Windsor, you've been super generous with your time. As per usual, I could talk your ears off for another 600,000 minutes, but I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much, Peter. If you are a fan of F1 and YouTube and podcasts, and you're not subscribed to the Peter Windsor YouTube channel already, what are you doing with your life? Go and do that now. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you ingest your podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, the Short Corners podcast is the pick to click. Remember to hype this video as well. On the right side of your screen, that's been Peter Windsor. I've been Cameron CC. Between now and next time, may all your sectors be purple.